Every morning on the celestial Voyager, I count the doors. Not just any doors, the ones that shouldn't be there. My name is Elena Reeves, and for the past 8 months, I've worked as a purser on one of the most luxurious cruise ships sailing the Mediterranean. The celestial Voyager is a floating paradise. 14 decks, 4 swimming pools, 7 restaurants, and accommodations for 2,400 passengers attended by 900 crew members. Before this job, I spent 3 years on smaller vessels, but nothing compares to the Voyager. Its size alone creates a strange phenomenon. Vast portions of the ship remain unseen by most passengers, who typically stick to the same few areas during their vacation. It's what makes my situation possible, I suppose. The first anomaly appeared during my second week aboard. I was delivering documents to the staff captain when I noticed a corridor that seemed wrong. Not wrong in any obvious way, just different from how I remembered it. I've always prided myself on my spatial awareness. It's practically a job requirement. But this hallway on Deck 3 seemed longer, with a door at the end that I didn't recall seeing before. A maintenance door, I assumed. The ship was constantly being serviced in subtle ways invisible to passengers. I mentioned it to Elena, my supervisor, who looked confused. "There's no door there," she said. "Just a wall. Engineering access is 2 corridors over." When I returned later that day, she was right. Just a wall. I might have dismissed it as a simple misperception, but 3 days later, I found another door where none should be, this one on Deck 8, in a crew-only section. Unmarked, unremarkable, easy to overlook unless you knew it shouldn't exist. When I checked the ship's schematics, that section showed only a solid bulkhead connecting 2 structural supports. By week 4, I'd found 7 such doors throughout the vessel. Always in low-traffic areas, always unmarked. Always gone when I returned with someone else. "You need more sleep," my roommate Mira suggested. "Ship hallucinations are common for new crew. Your brain gets confused with the constant motion and identical corridors." But I wasn't hallucinating. I started documenting the appearances, taking photos with my phone. The photos remained even when the doors disappeared. I showed Mira, who studied them with a frown. "Maybe they're service access points. The schematics don't always show everything." That's when I started counting them. Every morning, during my first rounds, I'd check all the locations where I'd previously spotted these anomalous doors. The count varied, sometimes 5, sometimes 9. Once, none at all. Their inconsistency was the only consistent thing about them. Until I saw one open. It was during a particularly rough night at sea. A storm had forced the cancellation of the evening's entertainment, leaving passengers restless and crews scrambling to manage complaints. Around 2 a.m., I was heading back to my cabin when the ship pitched sharply, sending me against the wall. As I steadied myself, I noticed one of my impossible doors at the end of the passage, and it stood about 3 inches ajar. I should have reported it. Should have called security. Instead, I approached it slowly, drawn by answers to questions that had consumed me for weeks. The narrow opening revealed darkness beyond, not the illuminated corridor or maintenance space I'd expected, but perfect, consuming blackness. As I reached for the handle, the ship lurched again, and the door swung open wider. A face appeared in the gap, pale, gaunt, with hollow eyes that fixed on mine with immediate recognition. "Finally!" the figure whispered, voice raspy from disuse. "Someone sees us." I stumbled backward as the figure emerged, a man in what appeared to be passenger clothes, but faded and worn as if he'd been wearing them for months. His hair hung limp, his beard untrimmed. Behind him, in the darkness, I glimpsed movement, other figures, shifting in the shadows, their outlines barely discernible. "How long has it been?" he asked, stepping fully into the corridor. "The days blur together when you're forgotten." Before I could respond, a call came over my radio, a passenger medical emergency requiring all available staff. I turned instinctively toward the sound, and when I looked back, both the man and the door had vanished. Just smooth wall where they had been. Sleep became impossible after that. I requested access to the ship's passenger manifests, cross-referencing faces with the man I'd seen. Nothing matched. I searched missing persons reports from previous voyages. Nothing. 2 nights later, I found another door open, this one on deck 11. I placed my hand on the cool metal, hesitating before pushing it wider. The same blackness waited beyond, but this time, a young woman stood in the threshold. "Are you real?" she asked, reaching toward me with trembling fingers. Her nails were broken, her skin pallid. "Sometimes they send phantoms to torment us." "Who's they?" I whispered, but the ship's intercom sounded, announcing the evening's entertainment options. The noise seemed to startle her, and she retreated into the darkness. The door swung shut before I could stop it. I began spending my off hours searching for open doors, ignoring the concerned looks from fellow crew members as I paced the ship's service corridors. Mira suggested I request shore leave at our next port. "You're becoming obsessed," she warned. "It's not healthy." Perhaps she was right. But I couldn't stop, not after what I'd seen. My breakthrough came when I noticed a pattern in the door appearances. They seemed more common after we'd taken on new passengers. I checked the manifest again, this time looking not for matches but for inconsistencies. The numbers troubled me. Passenger counts that didn't align with ticketing, cabin assignments with mismatched names. Then I found him, the gaunt man I'd encountered. Thomas Reiner, booked in cabin 8037 on a voyage 7 months ago. According to the records, he had disembarked in Barcelona with the other passengers. But security footage from that day showed no sign of him leaving the ship. I found 5 more discrepancies like this. Passengers who had supposedly disembarked but weren't on the security footage. All from different voyages, different ports. The implications chilled me. People disappearing from a cruise ship would cause international incidents, investigations. Unless no one knew they were missing. Single travelers. Couples who kept to themselves. People who hadn't shared their itineraries with family or friends. Perfect gaps in the world where a person could vanish without immediate notice. I brought my findings to the staff captain, who listened with growing concern. Not concern about missing passengers, concern about me. "Elena," he said gently, "I think you should take some time off. This job can be mentally taxing and—" "Check the manifest yourself," I interrupted. "Cross-reference with the security footage. 6 people, minimum, who supposedly left the ship but never actually did." He promised to look into it, but his eyes had already dismissed me. That night, I found 3 open doors. From each, faces watched me, gaunt, hollow, imploring. More than I'd seen before. I counted 12 distinct figures in the shadows beyond the first door. Their whispers followed me as I backed away. "Don't leave us. You see us now. You're one of the counters. They'll come for you next." I ran, not stopping until I reached the busy promenade where passengers mingled. Normal, visible passengers drinking and laughing, unaware of what existed in the spaces between decks. The next morning, the hotel director called me to his office. The staff captain stood beside him, along with the ship's doctor. "We're concerned about you, Elena," the director began. "Your behavior has been observed and reported by several colleagues. The doctor thinks you may be experiencing a stress reaction. Did you check the manifests?" I demanded, looking at the staff captain. "Did you look at the footage?" "We did," he said, not meeting my eyes. "Everything reconciles perfectly. No discrepancies." "That's not possible. I saw—" "You've been working too hard," the doctor interrupted smoothly. "It's not uncommon for crew to develop fixations or persecutory delusions after extended periods at sea. I'm recommending medical leave, effective immediately. We'll dock in Civitavecchia tomorrow, and arrangements will be made for your replacement." I realized then what was happening. Either they didn't believe me, or they were part of it. Either possibility was terrifying. That night was my last chance. I waited until after midnight, when most passengers had retreated to their cabins. The crew corridors were nearly empty, with only occasional staff hurrying between assignments. I made my way to Deck 3, where I'd seen the highest concentration of doors. I found one almost immediately, standing open wider than ever before. Beyond it, what had previously been darkness now appeared as a long, narrow passageway, curving slightly out of sight. The walls were metal, the floor bare. It looked like a service tunnel, but one that didn't appear on any schematic. A figure stood halfway down the passage, the young woman I'd seen before. She beckoned urgently. "Quickly!" she called. "They know you've been counting." Against every instinct, I stepped through. The air felt different, stale, processed too many times through recyclers. The passage extended in both directions, following the curve of the ship's hull. Doors lined the walls at irregular intervals, crude, makeshift doors that looked as if they'd been assembled from scavenged materials. "What is this place?" I whispered. "The Between," she answered. "Not on any deck, not on any plan. They built the ship around us." "Who are you? How did you get here?" "We're the forgotten. The unremembered. When they need someone, they take them. A passenger here, a crew member there. People who won't be immediately missed." "Need them for what?" She began to answer, but a sound echoed through the corridor, footsteps, approaching quickly. Fear flashed across her face. "They're coming. The counters. Like you, but changed. They maintain the balance." Before I could question her further, doors began opening throughout the passage. People emerged, dozens of them, in various states of dishevelment. Some looked as if they'd been there for years, others only weeks. All wore the hollow-eyed expression of those who had given up hope of rescue. "You have to help us," a man said, gripping my arm. I recognized him as Thomas Reiner. "You can see the doors. You can get us out." "How?" "I don't understand what's happening." "Who's keeping you here?" The footsteps grew louder. The group began pushing me further down the corridor, away from the approaching sound. "The ship needs sacrifices," an older woman whispered. "For safe passage. An old tradition the company revived when accidents became too frequent. One soul per voyage, given to the deep. Not killed, just forgotten. Removed from memory, from records. Placed in between." It sounded insane, yet I stood in a corridor that shouldn't exist, surrounded by people who had vanished from reality. The evidence surrounded me. "If I help you, what happens to the ship? To everyone on board?" The question silenced them momentarily. Thomas finally spoke, his voice barely audible. "We don't know. That's what they fear, why they won't let us go. The balance might collapse. The ship might remember what it's done." The footsteps stopped. At the far end of the corridor, several figures stood watching us, crew members I recognized, including the staff captain and hotel director. Their expressions were blank, eyes unfocused as if they weren't fully present. "Elena Reeves," the staff captain called, his voice oddly flat. "You've been counting the doors. Seeing what's not meant to be seen. There are only two paths forward now." I understood the choice he wasn't explicitly offering. Join the disappeared or become one of the counters, those who maintained this horrific system, who preserved the ship's dark secret. I made my choice in that moment. Grabbing Thomas's arm, I pulled him toward the door I'd entered through, gesturing for the others to follow. "Run!" I shouted. "Get to the main deck, find passengers, make yourselves seen." They surged forward as one, a tide of the forgotten rushing toward visibility. The counters moved to intercept, but they were outnumbered. I saw the panic in the staff captain's eyes as the first few disappeared through the door, emerging into the real ship. I never made it out. A hand caught my ankle as I neared the threshold, dragging me back. The last thing I saw before the door slammed shut was the young woman who had warned me, standing in the corridor beyond, looking back with a mixture of gratitude and regret. That was 3 voyages ago. I've learned to count carefully since then. To maintain the balance. To find the ones who won't be missed. But I've also learned to leave doors open. Just slightly. Just enough. If you're reading this, you've found one of my messages. Which means you might also find one of my doors. If you do, please count carefully. Notice the discrepancies. Remember those who've been forgotten. And if your cabin seems to change position overnight, if corridors extend where they previously ended, if you count more doors than should exist, don't mention it to the crew. Don't draw attention. Just keep counting. We'll be watching from between. I've spent 7 years working on cruise ships, and no one believes me when I say the ocean takes exactly what it wants. My name is Ellie Mercer. I'm a 32-year-old former cruise ship employee who still wakes up some nights feeling the gentle sway of a vessel that isn't there. I started as a steward on the Paradise Dreams, a mid-sized luxury liner that carried 2,800 passengers through the Caribbean. Good pay, free room and board, and the chance to see the world. It almost sounds too good to be true, right? Maybe it was. When you live on a floating city, you learn quickly that there are two separate worlds. The passengers see the gleaming pools, the buffets that never close, the smiling staff, and the endless entertainment. What they don't see is the cramped crew quarters below the waterline, the 16-hour shifts, the hierarchy, and the isolation that comes from being trapped with the same people for months at a time. But I adapted. After 3 years, I'd been promoted to guest relations manager on the company's flagship vessel, the Oceania Grand. A bigger ship, better pay, but the same rules. What happens on the ship stays on the ship. The company drilled this into us repeatedly during training. No matter what you see, what you hear, it's handled internally. Most issues were trivial. Drunk passengers, minor thefts, petty disputes. Sometimes medical emergencies or the occasional death, usually elderly passengers with health conditions. When you move 3,400 people across the ocean every week, statistics say some won't make it back. The crew called it going home in a box. Cold, but that's how we coped. Then came the Callaway disappearance. Mark and Tara Callaway, Cabin 8057, celebrating their 5th anniversary on our 14-day Mediterranean cruise. Young, attractive, apparently wealthy. The kind of couple who books the premium package, posts perfect photos, and tips well. I'd spoken with them twice myself, once to help with an excursion booking and once when Mark complained about the noise from a neighboring cabin. They seemed normal. Happy. On the 8th night, somewhere between Sicily and Greece, Tara reported Mark missing. He'd gone for a late-night swim while she took a sleeping pill and went to bed early. When she woke at 6 a.m., he hadn't returned. Security initiated our standard missing person protocol. The ship was systematically searched, section by section. Every cabin, every service area, every storage space. Nothing. Security footage showed Mark entering the pool area at 11:42 p.m. He never appeared on any camera leaving it. The pool itself was emptied. Nothing. The entire ship was in lockdown for 6 hours while the search continued. The captain made the announcement over the PA that a passenger had gone missing, using the practiced, calm voice we all use during emergencies. I was tasked with monitoring Tara. We put her in a private lounge while the search continued. She didn't cry, didn't rage. She just sat there, strangely calm, sipping the tea I'd brought her. "He'll turn up," she said. "Mark's always been dramatic." By hour 7, the security chief called the captain. I was present in the bridge when he delivered his conclusion. Mark Callaway had gone overboard. There was just one problem. The anti-jumping barriers on the pool deck were intact. The only way overboard from the pool area was through a secured crew door, which camera footage confirmed had not been opened. There was no evidence of foul play, no blood, no signs of struggle. A man had simply vanished from a locked ship in the middle of the Mediterranean. "We need to radio the maritime authorities," I said. "Get search and rescue started." The captain didn't respond immediately. He exchanged a look with the security chief that made my skin crawl. "Fill out the incident report, Ellie," he finally said. "Code it as a probable overboard. We'll make the call." I returned to Tara with the update. Her response chilled me. "I was afraid this would happen," she said, staring at her hands. "He's been talking about the water calling to him since Naples. Said he could hear voices when we were near the coastline. I thought it was just, the anniversary stress." That night, the ship continued on its route. Passengers were told that a guest had experienced a medical emergency and been airlifted to shore. Only a few crew members knew the truth. Mark Calloway had vanished without explanation. 2 days later, I was reviewing the security footage again, something about it nagging at me. I watched Mark walk to the adult pool, place his towel on a chair, and dive in. The camera angle switched to show the pool itself. Mark swam a few laps, then floated on his back, eyes closed. At 12:17 a.m., he swam to the edge, and the camera caught him speaking to someone off-screen. I hadn't noticed this the first time through. I zoomed in, adjusted the contrast. Mark was clearly talking, nodding. He looked entranced. Then he swam to the center of the pool, took a deep breath, and dove under. He never resurfaced. I watched that footage a dozen times, scrutinizing every pixel. The pool's surface rippled for a moment, then went still. No bubbles, no struggle. Just empty water. When I showed the chief, he took the footage and told me to get back to work. That afternoon, I found myself assigned to escort Tara during a private meeting with the captain. I wasn't supposed to hear their conversation, but I lingered near the door to the captain's office. "Mrs. Calloway, I understand this is difficult, but I assure you we've conducted an exhaustive search," the captain was saying. "I'm not blaming you," Tara replied, her voice eerily composed. "I'm just curious if this has happened before." A long silence. "I'm not sure what you mean. People disappearing from your ships. Without a trace." Another pause. "Overboards are rare but not unprecedented in the industry." "But that's not what happened to Mark, is it? The water took him." The conversation stopped abruptly when they realized I was listening. I was immediately reassigned to another section of the ship. That night, I broke protocol and visited Tara in her cabin. I needed to understand what she meant. She let me in without surprise, as if she'd been expecting me. Her cabin was immaculate, with no sign of her husband's belongings. On the table sat a thick file folder. 6 cases, she said without preamble. 6 people who vanished from cruise ships in the Mediterranean over the past decade. No bodies recovered. All reported as probable overboards despite no evidence. She'd been researching this before their cruise. Mark hadn't been the target, he'd been the bait. "My husband was a marine biologist specializing in deep-sea anomalies," she continued. "He believed something was taking people. Something in the water. He thought if he could get close enough." I left her cabin that night with more questions than answers. The next morning, Tara Calloway was gone too. Her bed hadn't been slept in. Security footage showed nothing. She'd vanished just like her husband. By the time we docked in Athens, the official report stated that both Calloways had gone overboard in separate incidents. Tragic, but not unprecedented. Passengers were quietly compensated for the disruption. The company's legal team took over, and I was transferred to a different ship with a promotion and a significant raise. That was 3 years ago. I've since left the industry, but I still research disappearances at sea. The pattern continues, people vanishing from locked ships, always in the same regions of ocean. The cruise lines settle quickly with families, investigations go nowhere. The ocean keeps its secrets. Sometimes I dream about Mark Calloway, floating on his back, staring at the stars. In my dreams he turns to me and says, "It's beautiful down here, Ellie. You should join us. I won't be taking another cruise. And if you do, remember, when the water calls to you, don't answer." I've crossed the Atlantic 17 times as a cruise ship photographer. No one warns you about the passengers who appear in your photos but never disembark. My name is Claire Sullivan, and until 8 weeks ago, I was the lead photographer aboard the Oceanic Majesty, a luxury liner carrying 3,100 passengers on transatlantic voyages. It was my 4th year with Meridian Cruise Lines, decent pay, free room and board, and the chance to build my portfolio capturing idyllic sunsets and beaming vacationers. I first noticed the anomalies 3 crossings ago. Nothing dramatic, just small inconsistencies in my photographs that I initially attributed to exhaustion or equipment glitches. A woman in a vintage red dress appearing in the background of multiple photos taken days apart, always in the same pose. An elderly man with a distinctive bow tie who showed up in several group shots despite not being part of the posed parties. A child with a blue balloon standing on the promenade deck at night when children weren't allowed in that area after 10 p.m. What made these figures strange wasn't just their repetition. It was that they never appeared in the foreground of my shots, never stopped at my portrait station, never showed up for the formal night photos that virtually every passenger purchased. They were always slightly blurred, always in the distance, always watching. I mentioned it to my assistant, Miguel, showing him a series of shots from the previous week's captain's dinner. See this woman in the background? She's been in at least 20 different photos this cruise, but I've never seen her in person. Miguel frowned, leaning closer to my laptop screen. Maybe she's just camera shy except when you're not looking directly at her. That doesn't explain how she's wearing the exact same outfit in every shot. Over 6 different days. Weird, he admitted. Maybe ask guest services if they can identify her? It seemed like a reasonable suggestion, so the next morning, I brought my laptop to the purser's desk. Vivian, the guest relations manager, had been with Meridian for over a decade. If anyone could help, it would be her. I pulled up a clear shot where the woman in the red dress was particularly visible. Do you recognize this passenger? She keeps appearing in my photos. Vivian's smile remained fixed, but something in her eyes changed. She stared at the screen for several seconds too long, then looked up at me with that practiced customer service expression that never reaches the eyes. I'm sorry, I don't recognize her. Perhaps she's staying in one of the premium suites? Those guests often keep to themselves. Could you check the manifest? Her cabin number would be. I'm afraid I can't share passenger information. Vivian interrupted, closing my laptop more forcefully than necessary. Privacy policies. I pressed further. I don't need personal details, just confirmation that she's actually on board. These photos are unusual. Vivian's professional demeanor cracked slightly. Claire, how long have you been with Meridian now? Almost 4 years. Then you understand how important discretion is. Some things we see or hear on board are best forgotten. She slid my laptop back across the counter. I'd suggest deleting those particular photos. Technical errors happen all the time with digital equipment at sea. That night, I couldn't sleep. Vivian's reaction had been strange, dismissive in a way that felt deliberate rather than bureaucratic. I slipped out of my small crew cabin and headed up to Deck 12, where the ship's photo gallery displayed the thousands of images we took each day for passengers to purchase. The gallery was deserted at 2 a.m., illuminated only by the glow of digital display screens. I logged into the system and began searching through the current voyage's photos, looking for more instances of my mysterious subjects. What I found chilled me. The woman in the red dress appeared in 47 different photographs. The man with the bow tie was in 32. The child with the blue balloon showed up in 19, always at night. And there were others I hadn't previously noticed. A teenage boy with headphones who never seemed to engage with anyone around him. An elderly couple who always stood at the railing looking out at the sea. A crew member in an outdated uniform I didn't recognize. None of them ever looked directly at the camera. None of them ever interacted with other passengers. And in several sequential shots taken seconds apart, they hadn't moved at all, as if they were frozen while everyone around them continued normally. I was so engrossed in my discovery that I didn't hear the gallery door open. A hand gripped my shoulder, and I nearly screamed. "What are you doing, Miss Sullivan?" Captain Hargrove's voice was calm but cold. I hadn't had many interactions with the captain during my time on board. He was an imposing figure, a 30-year veteran of the cruise industry with a reputation for running a tight ship. "I'm reviewing some anomalies in the photo collection, sir." His eyes flicked to the screen, where the woman in the red dress was clearly visible in the background of a poolside gathering. "Log out of the system, please." I complied, hands trembling slightly. "Miss Sullivan, how familiar are you with the history of the Oceanic Majesty?" The question caught me off guard. "Not very. I know it's about 15 years old, built in Finland." This ship has made 224 Atlantic crossings. That's approximately 694,000 passengers. He paused, his gaze still fixed on the now dark screen. Not all of them reached their destination. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. What do you mean? The ocean is vast and unforgiving. Even with all our modern technology, people still go missing at sea. It's rare, but it happens. Are you saying these people in my photos are missing passengers? Captain Hargrove's expression remained neutral. I'm saying that a ship of this size has countless stories within its hull, not all of them for public consumption. Some passengers leave a more persistent impression than others. He straightened his already impeccable uniform. I would suggest focusing your talents on capturing the living, breathing guests who are enjoying their vacations. Those are the memories we're paid to preserve, aren't they? After he left, I remained in the darkened gallery, my mind racing. I needed to know more about these figures in my photographs, these people who seemed to exist in some liminal space between presence and absence. The next day, I approached Vincent, a veteran bartender who'd been with Meridian since before the Oceanic Majesty was launched. If anyone knew the ship's secrets, it would be him. I showed him the pictures on my phone during his break, keeping my voice low despite the empty bar. Do you recognize any of these people? Vincent's weathered face remained impassive as he scrolled through the images, but his hand trembled slightly. He lingered on the photo of the woman in the red dress. Elizabeth Harlow, he said finally. That was her name. Crossed with us in 2011, honeymoon cruise. Her husband reported her missing somewhere mid-Atlantic. They assumed she'd gone overboard, but... He shrugged. No evidence. It happens more than the company admits. He pointed to the man with the bow tie. Dr. Keller. Heart attack in his cabin, 2015. Dead for hours before his wife found him. Then the child with the balloon. That's Tommy Chin. Disappeared during Christmas cruise 2017. Parents said he was at the kids' club. Kids' club said he was with parents. Never found. I felt sick. How do you know all this? Vincent gave me a tired smile. 23 years at sea, you hear things. You remember faces. Especially the ones that don't make it home. But why are they in my photos? How is that possible? The ocean changes people. Maybe it changes the ship too. He handed back my phone. My advice? Delete these, forget what you've seen, and finish your contract. Some questions don't have answers you want to hear. But I couldn't let it go. That night, I waited until 3 a.m., when the ship was at its quietest, and made my way to the Promenade Deck, where most of my phantom passengers had appeared. The deck was deserted, the loungers empty, the pools still. The only sound was the persistent hum of the engines and the whisper of the Atlantic passing 14 decks below. I set up my camera on a tripod and began taking long exposure shots of the empty deck, the darkened lounges, the silent corridors. For an hour, nothing unusual appeared. Then, reviewing the images on my camera's display, I saw them. The woman in the red dress, standing at the railing. The boy with the headphones, sitting cross-legged on a deck chair. The elderly couple, arm in arm near the forward stairwell. In my viewfinder, the deck remained empty. But in the captured images, they were undeniably present. I felt a sudden cold breeze that shouldn't have been possible in the enclosed space. Looking up from my camera, I found myself staring at the woman in the red dress, Elizabeth, standing directly in front of me. Not in the photograph, but here, now, close enough to touch. Her eyes were dark empty holes, her face pale and drawn. Her red dress billowed slightly, though there was no wind. Her lips moved, but I heard nothing. I ran. Back to my cabin, heart pounding, camera clutched to my chest. I didn't sleep that night, or the next. When we docked in Southampton, I submitted my resignation and was off the ship within hours, breaking my contract and sacrificing thousands in potential earnings. That was 8 weeks ago. I've deleted most of the photos, though I kept a few as evidence of what I experienced. I've tried contacting former colleagues still with the line, but they either don't respond or provide vague, uncomfortable reassurances. Last week, I received an unmarked envelope in the mail. Inside was a Meridian Cruise Line's brochure for the upcoming season. Someone had circled a specific crossing, the Oceanic Majesty's November transatlantic voyage. A note in unfamiliar handwriting read, "We're waiting for you to return." In the brochure, photos of the ship, barely visible on the promenade deck, stands a figure I recognize all too well. A woman in a white uniform, camera in hand. She has my face. I've destroyed the brochure, changed my phone number, even moved apartments. But I can't escape the nagging fear that someday, someone will be reviewing their cruise photos and notice a familiar figure in the background, a photographer who captures everyone but is never seen disembarking. I won't be taking another cruise. And if you do, check your vacation photos carefully. Not everyone in them may have reached the shore. The sea doesn't just swallow people. Sometimes it gives them back changed. When I boarded the South Pacific Voyager as the ship's new physician last December, I expected sunburns, seasickness, and the occasional broken bone from passengers who'd had too many margaritas at the pool. Standard cruise ship medicine. What I didn't expect was to confront something that defied every principle of modern science I've been taught. My name is Dr. Eliza Chin. I'm 38, board-certified in emergency medicine, with 7 years of experience in trauma centers before I grew tired of the relentless pace and constant exposure to human tragedy. The cruise line position promised a less stressful environment and the chance to see the world between patients. 3 months into my 6-month contract, I almost broke it to escape what happened in cabin 7213. The Voyager is massive, 15 decks, 3,800 passengers, 1,200 crew members. The medical center is staffed by 2 physicians and 4 nurses, equipped to handle everything from minor injuries to cardiac events. We can stabilize most emergencies until the patient can be evacuated or we reach port. In serious cases, we divert the ship. That's what makes this story so disturbing. We couldn't divert. We couldn't evacuate. We were 3 days from the nearest port when it began. Our head nurse, Malcolm, paged me at 2:14 a.m. on a calm night somewhere between Fiji and New Caledonia. "Dr. Chin, security is bringing in a passenger from cabin 7213. Appears disoriented, possible psychiatric episode." I met them at the medical center entrance. 2 security officers were escorting a middle-aged woman in a bathrobe who was shivering uncontrollably despite the warm night. Her hair was wet, her skin pale and clammy. She wasn't struggling, just staring ahead with an emptiness that immediately concerned me. "Ma'am, I'm Dr. Chin. Can you tell me your name?" No response. Her eyes didn't track my movement. "Her name is Patricia Winters, according to her key card," one of the officers offered. "Her husband reported that she got up to use the bathroom around 1 a.m. and didn't return. He found her on their balcony, soaking wet, staring at the ocean. Says she was completely unresponsive to him." I conducted a preliminary examination. Vital signs were concerning. Temperature 94.6 degrees Fahrenheit. Heart rate 45 BPM. Blood pressure 90/60ths. Pupils equally reactive but sluggish. No visible injuries or signs of trauma. She was wet from head to toe with what smelled like seawater, not shower water. "Ms. Winters, can you hear me?" I asked, shining a penlight in her eyes. She finally focused on my face. "They're in the water," she whispered. "Waiting." "Who's in the water, Patricia?" "Everyone who's ever gone in. They don't leave. They change." Her husband, Robert Winters, a stocky man in his 50s with thinning hair and anxious eyes, hovered nearby. "She's never had psychiatric issues," he insisted. "We've been married 26 years. This isn't like her at all." I ordered warm blankets, for fluids for the hypothermia, and basic labs. As the nurses worked, I took Mr. Winters aside. "Has your wife been drinking tonight? Taking any medications? Recreational drugs?" He shook his head emphatically. "We had wine with dinner, that's all. 1 glass each. She takes a statin for cholesterol and a multivitamin. That's it. Has she ever sleepwalked?" Never. How did she get so wet? Did she shower fully clothed? Robert looked uncomfortable. That's what's so strange. Our balcony door was locked from the inside. I always check it before bed. I'm paranoid about that sort of thing on a ship. When I woke up and realized she wasn't in bed, I found her standing on the balcony, soaking wet like she'd been swimming. I frowned. Mr. Winters, we're on the 7th deck. There's no way your wife could have gone overboard and returned. I know. That's why I'm so frightened. Patricia was admitted to our small inpatient unit for overnight observation. By morning, her vitals had normalized, but her psychological state remained disturbing. She would respond to basic questions but kept returning to the same theme. They're changing in the water. They're waiting for us to join them. Our on-board psychiatrist, Dr. Rivera, evaluated her and suggested an acute stress reaction or brief psychotic episode. We decided to monitor her closely while continuing supportive care. That evening, as I was finishing my shift, Malcolm paged me again. Dr. Chin, we have another passenger. Same presentation. A man in his 30s, Alan Costas, found wandering the corridor near cabin 7341, dripping wet, disoriented, talking about voices from the water. His cabin mate reported he'd gone for a late swim in the pool, but the pool had closed at 10 p.m. Security footage confirmed he'd never been at the pool. Like Patricia, his skin was cold and smelled of seawater, not chlorine. By the next morning, we had 3 more cases. All from different cabins, all on the starboard side of Deck 7, all found wet with seawater, all describing similar delusions about entities in the ocean. I called an emergency meeting with the captain, chief of security, and hotel director. The ship's physician outranks almost everyone when it comes to public health emergencies, and this was quickly becoming one. We need to relocate all passengers from the starboard side of Deck 7, I insisted. There might be some environmental factor, a leak, a chemical, something affecting that section of the ship. Captain Rivera looked skeptical. That's 60 cabins, Dr. Chin. Where exactly do you suggest we put them? We're fully booked. The conference center could serve as temporary accommodations. This is a potential contagion situation. Contagion? The hotel director scoffed. These are psychiatric episodes, not a virus. We don't know what they are. I countered. 5 passengers, same symptoms, same location on the ship? That's a pattern that can't be ignored. They agreed to test the air quality and water systems on Deck 7 but refused to relocate passengers without more evidence. I was instructed to continue monitoring the affected patients and report any new cases immediately. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Patricia Winters' words. They're changing in the water. Against my better judgment, I left my crew cabin and headed to Deck 7. The corridor was quiet, dimly lit for night hours. I walked slowly past the rooms where our patients had been staying. Nothing seemed unusual until I reached cabin 7213, the Winters room. The door was sealed with security tape. They'd been moved to a different cabin after the incident. I pressed my ear against the door. At first, nothing. Then a soft, rhythmic sound, like water lapping against the hull. But we were 7 decks above the waterline. Using my medical override key, I entered the cabin. It was dark, the balcony door closed and locked as Mr. Winters had described. The room appeared normal, suitcases neatly stowed, bed made by housekeeping, personal items arranged on the desk. The sound was louder inside, a definite sloshing of water. It seemed to be coming from the bathroom. Heart racing, I approached the partially closed bathroom door and pushed it open. The bathroom was dry. Perfectly normal. The sound stopped immediately. I was turning to leave when I noticed a dark stain on the carpet near the balcony door. Bending down, I touched it, damp, with the unmistakable scent of seawater. The stain formed a trail from the bathroom to the balcony door, as if something wet had dragged itself across the floor. The balcony door, supposedly locked, slid open at my touch. The night air was warm, the sea calm below. Nothing unusual except for a strange iridescence in the water directly beneath the ship, a faint, pulsing blue-green glow that didn't match any bioluminescent phenomenon I was familiar with. As I leaned over the railing to look closer, the glow intensified, seeming to rise toward me. The longer I stared, the more it resembled a face. No, multiple faces, forming and dissolving in the waves. A voice behind me made me jump. "You see them now, don't you, Doctor?" Patricia Winters stood in the doorway of the cabin, still in her hospital gown. How she'd left the medical center without anyone noticing, I couldn't fathom. "Patricia, you need to return to the medical center," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "How did you get here?" "They showed me the way." She moved beside me on the balcony, gazing down at the glowing water. "They'd been under this ship since we left port. Following us. Calling to us." "Who are they, Patricia?" "People who went in. People who were taken. But they're not people anymore." Her voice was eerily calm. "They need more to join them. To help them become something new. Let's go back inside," I urged, suddenly afraid she might try to jump. She turned to me, her eyes reflecting the unnatural light from below. "They've already been in our cabin, Doctor. They come up through the drains when the ship is quiet. They marked us. That's how they choose." I grabbed her arm, intending to pull her inside, and recoiled at the texture of her skin. It was wrong, too smooth, too cool, almost slick. Like wet rubber. She smiled, revealing teeth that seemed too numerous, too sharp. "It's already happening to us. The changing. Soon we'll go to them." I ran. Back through the cabin, down the corridor, not stopping until I reached the medical center. I paged security, reported Patricia missing, and tried to explain what I'd seen. They found her back in her hospital bed 20 minutes later, with no explanation for how she'd returned. The night nurse swore she'd never left. Security footage showed no movement in the corridors. By morning, 2 more passengers had been admitted with the same symptoms. Both from Deck 7, both found wet with seawater, both talking about voices from the ocean. I examined their skin under magnification and found subtle changes in texture and pigmentation. Microscopic scales forming beneath the epidermis. Blood tests showed unexplainable alterations in electrolyte balances. Their body chemistry was changing to tolerate saltwater immersion. When I presented my findings to the captain, he ordered a complete lockdown of Deck 7 and emergency protocols enacted. We were still 36 hours from port. That night, all 7 affected passengers disappeared from the medical center simultaneously. Alarms sounded throughout the ship. They were found on the starboard promenade deck, holding hands in a circle, their skin visibly transformed, gray-blue, scaled in places, eyes enlarged and glassy. Before security could reach them, they moved as one to the railing and went over the side. We searched for hours. No bodies were recovered. The official report calls it a mass suicide, triggered by shared psychosis of unknown origin. I know better. 3 weeks after we returned to port, I received a package at my home, a small, waterproof box containing a single shell that glows faintly in the dark and a note in handwriting I recognized as Patricia Winters. "The water is wonderful, Doctor. You were marked too. We're waiting for you to join us. I've moved inland since then, as far from the ocean as I could get. I've submitted my resignation to the cruise line and sought therapy for what the medical board calls traumatic delusions. But sometimes, in the shower, I catch myself examining my skin for changes. And sometimes, when I close my eyes, I see those glowing faces rising from the depths, calling me home to the water. If you're planning a cruise vacation, avoid cabin 7213 on the South Pacific Voyager. Better yet, stay on land. Some mysteries of the deep should remain undisturbed, and some calls should remain unanswered. I was hired to plan fun activities for cruise ship passengers. I didn't understand why those who missed activities kept disappearing until it was too late. My name is Marcus Reed. Until 6 weeks ago, I was the assistant entertainment director aboard the Celestial Journey, a luxury cruise liner operated by Horizon Cruise Lines. The Celestial was one of their newer ships, 16 decks, 3,200 passengers, 8 restaurants, 5 pools, and a Commitment to creating unforgettable memories, as our corporate talking points emphasized. I joined the company straight out of hospitality school, thrilled to land a position with growth potential and the chance to see the world. My job was to coordinate daily activities, trivia contests, dance classes, wine tastings, cooking demonstrations, all the scheduled fun that keeps passengers entertained between ports. I took pride in my work, tracking attendance numbers and satisfaction ratings meticulously. The trouble began 3 months into my contract, during a 14-day Mediterranean voyage from Barcelona to Athens. I noticed something odd in the attendance reports I filed each night. Passengers who missed multiple activities were disappearing from the manifest. Not just from my events, but from the ship entirely. At first, I assumed they were simply keeping to themselves. Some passengers booked cruises just to relax in their cabins or by the pool. But these weren't just low attendance numbers. These were complete absences from all ship functions, dining venues, and shore excursions, followed by their names vanishing from our systems. I mentioned it to my direct supervisor, Diane Fletcher, the head entertainment director. She'd been with Horizon for over 15 years, a cruise industry lifer with a permanent tan and a smile that never quite reached her eyes. Some passengers choose to disembark early, she explained, not looking up from her tablet. Personal emergencies, health issues, or they simply don't enjoy the experience. We process them quietly to avoid disturbing other guests. Her explanation made sense, but something about her tone felt rehearsed. Still, I had 73 activities to coordinate each day. I didn't have time to investigate passenger movements. Then I met Claire Monroe, a retired librarian from Portland traveling alone, who attended my watercolor class every morning at 10 a.m. Claire was a delight, thoughtful, curious, and genuinely interested in learning to paint. We developed a friendly rapport over the first week of the cruise. On day 8, Claire didn't show up for class. She missed the afternoon trivia competition as well, which she'd never skipped before. Concerned, I checked the system after my shift. Her name was still on the manifest, but with a note. Scheduled for entertainment assessment. I'd never heard of this procedure in all my training. When I asked Diane about it, her smile tightened. Some passengers need additional attention to ensure they're experiencing our full entertainment package, she explained. Ms. Monroe expressed dissatisfaction with certain aspects of our programming. She never mentioned any complaints to me, I said. Diane's expression didn't change. That's precisely why we monitor attendance so carefully, Marcus. Guests don't always voice their concerns directly. The next morning, Claire was back at watercolor class, sitting in her usual spot by the window. But something was different. Her movements were stiffer, her smile fixed. When I asked if she'd been feeling unwell the previous day, her response chilled me. I needed to understand the importance of participation, she said, voice slightly monotone. Horizon Cruise Lines values mandatory fun. Don't you agree, Marcus? I laughed uncomfortably, assuming she was making a joke about the relentless schedule of activities cruise ships are known for. But she didn't laugh with me. She just stared, that strange smile never wavering, before returning to her painting with mechanical precision. After class, I noticed a small bandage on the back of her neck, partially hidden by her collar. When I asked about it, she touched it absently. An adjustment, she said, for optimal enjoyment. Over the next few days, Claire attended every activity on her schedule with unwavering punctuality. No more casual conversations, no more thoughtful questions about technique. Just perfect attendance, and that same empty smile. 2 more passengers underwent entertainment assessments that week, a middle-aged man who'd skipped the evening shows 3 nights in a row, and a young woman who declined participation in pool games. Both returned to activities afterward, showing the same rigid compliance as Claire. My curiosity turned to concern. During my break, I searched for entertainment assessment in the ship's crew database. Nothing. It wasn't listed in any training materials or operating procedures. I asked other entertainment staff if they'd heard of it. Most hadn't, but one bartender from the Starlight Lounge lowered his voice when he responded. Don't ask questions about that, he warned. Just make sure your attendance numbers stay high. That night, I couldn't sleep. At 2 a.m., I used my staff keycard to access the administrative deck where passenger records were kept. The corridor was deserted, lights dimmed for night hours. I slipped into the records office, logged into the system, and searched for Claire Monroe's file. Her profile contained standard information, cabin number, dining preferences, excursion bookings, but also included a section labeled Compliance Metrics that I'd never seen before. Claire's rating had changed from monitoring required to fully compliant on the day of her assessment. A medical notation referenced Procedure HC7, with an authorization from Dr. Elliot Weber, the ship's physician. I searched for other passengers who had disappeared from activities, finding the same pattern: missed events, assessment scheduled, compliance rating changed. But a few had a different status. Removed from manifest, irreconcilable. The office door opened. Working late, Marcus? Diane stood in the doorway, still in her uniform despite the hour. Behind her was a security officer I didn't recognize. Just checking tomorrow's attendance projections, I lied, trying to casually close the screen. No, you're not. She stepped inside, the security officer remaining at the door. You're accessing restricted passenger files. That's a serious breach of protocol. I was concerned about Claire Monroe, I admitted. She's not herself since the assessment. Diane sighed, taking the seat beside me. Marcus, Horizon Cruise Lines guarantees passengers the vacation of a lifetime. To deliver on that promise, we must ensure participation. Non-participation affects not only our metrics but the overall cruise experience. What exactly happens during these assessments? I asked. A minor adjustment to help guests appreciate our carefully designed entertainment options. She spoke as if explaining something simple to a child. Dr. Weber has developed a procedure that enhances receptivity to scheduled fun. It's completely safe. And the passengers listed as irreconcilable? Her expression hardened. Some guests cannot be adjusted properly. They become disruptive. For the greater enjoyment of all, they must be removed. Removed how? We're in the middle of the Mediterranean. The security officer stepped forward. Mr. Reed, you've accessed unauthorized information. You'll need to come with us for an assessment of your own. I ran. Through the fire exit, down the service stairs, through the galley kitchens where night staff were preparing breakfast pastries. I had no plan, just blind panic and the certainty that I couldn't let them take me to Dr. Weber. I found myself on the lowest passenger deck, in a narrow corridor I didn't recognize. Ahead, a door marked medical storage stood slightly ajar, lights spilling out. Voices came from inside, Dr. Weber and someone else, their conversation clinical and detached. Third rejection this cruise, Weber was saying. The neural implants simply won't integrate with certain neurological types. Unfortunate, replied a voice I recognized as Captain Hargroves. Disposal at our next deep water point? Yes. The weighted containers are prepared. Similar density to the previous subjects. I must have made a sound, because the voices stopped. I fled again, this time to my cabin, where I'd barricaded the door with my desk and packed essential items in a small bag. They would come for me soon. My key card would be deactivated. I had few options. We were scheduled to dock in Santorini the next morning. If I could hold out until then, I might escape. I spent the night recording everything I'd discovered on my phone, emailing copies to my personal account and to friends back home, setting them to deliver if I didn't cancel the scheduled send within 24 hours. They came for me just before dawn, Diane, Dr. Weber, and 2 security officers. I refused to open the door. This is a misunderstanding, Marcus, Diane called through the door. No one is going to hurt you. We just need to discuss your concerns. Like you discussed with the irreconcilable passengers? I shouted back. I know what happens to them. A heavy sigh from the other side. This is precisely why we need protocols. Crew members can develop unfounded anxieties in the closed environment of a ship. Dr. Weber can help. We dock in 3 hours. I'll leave quietly then. No reports, no complaints. I'm afraid that's not possible, Dr. Weber responded. You've accessed sensitive information. Standard termination procedures are insufficient. They began overriding my door lock. I had seconds to make a decision. My cabin was on deck 4, with a small porthole window overlooking the water. Not designed to open, but the emergency hammer in my bathroom could change that. The drop to the ocean was substantial but not impossible. We were moving slowly, approaching port. I might survive. I broke the porthole as they breached the door. Cold morning air rushed in. Don't be foolish, Dr. Weber warned, advancing with what looked like a medical injector. The fall could kill you. Better than becoming one of your adjusted passengers, I replied, and squeezed through the opening. The impact with the water knocked the breath from my lungs. The current pulled me away from the ship's massive hull, saving me from being crushed. I surfaced, gasping, watching the celestial journey continue its approach to Santorini. A Greek fishing boat spotted me half an hour later, hypothermic but alive. I told them I'd fallen overboard accidentally. After medical treatment on Santorini, I contacted my family to wire money for a flight home. I've spent the weeks since then trying to get authorities to investigate Horizon Cruise Lines. My emails and calls to maritime agencies, cruise regulatory bodies, and law enforcement have been met with polite skepticism at best. I've been told my allegations are extraordinary and require extraordinary evidence. The evidence I collected, screenshots, recordings, disappeared from my accounts before I reached home. Horizon's official statement is that I suffered a psychological break due to work stress and abandoned my position. They express concern for my mental health and wish me well in my recovery. Claire Monroe and other passengers I mentioned have perfect reviews on the company's customer satisfaction surveys. Yesterday, I received a brochure in the mail, though I've moved twice since returning. A Horizon Cruise Lines brochure, advertising their newest ship, the Eternal Bliss. A handwritten note inside read: We've enhanced our entertainment assessment protocols. Perhaps you'd enjoy another cruise with us? This time, we guarantee you'll have fun until the very end. The celestial journey continues its Mediterranean route. Every 2 weeks, it welcomes 3,200 new passengers, all expecting the vacation of a lifetime. Most will enjoy the trip exactly as planned. Some will skip the wrong activities, ask the wrong questions, or resist mandatory fun. I wonder how many weighted containers they drop into the deep waters between ports, and how many smiling passengers are no longer quite themselves. If you're booking a cruise, remember to attend all scheduled activities. The entertainment staff is watching. Your compliance ensures a perfect vacation experience for yourself and everyone around you.